we now have about 18 ships and one nuclear submarine that are currently off the coast of Caracas down here. And President Trump just ordered the USS Gerald R, which is the largest aircraft carrier that's operational on the planet, to bring some of its attack group and start steaming over to the Caribbean as well. And this is a serious buildup. If you look at that and put it in context, we have not had a ship or a aircraft carrier in the Mediterranean in 25 years, meaning we've kept a presence in the Middle East, and rightly so, for 25 years. And right now, with the Gerald Ford leaving, we do not have a aircraft carrier group in the Mediterranean. And so that's like a big deal. And so it makes a lot of people go, man, what is Trump planning here against Venezuela? Are we going to take over Venezuela? Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, right next door over here, says that President Trump wants to take over Venezuela so they can have their oil. This is not about drugs. There's no fentanyl coming out of Venezuela, which is true. But there is a lot of cocaine coming out of there. I'll talk about that in just a second. There's a couple of problems with that. First of all, if you just look at the makeup of the forces that we have in the Caribbean right now, it's a lot. We've got 10,000 troops. We've got, as I said, 18 ships and submarine and more ships on the way. We've got more than 100 aircraft in Puerto Rico and a bunch of Coast Guard ships and all kinds of stuff. However, none of that, 10,000 troops, is not enough to invade Venezuela. Part of that is because in that 10,000 troops, that's not 10,000 war fighters. That's not 10,000 Marines that are going to storm the beaches. There's about 4,000 Marines, and the rest of those are naval personnel and support personnel, that what they call the tail. So in modern military operations, usually you have about a 1-to-3 tooth to tail ratio, meaning the warfighters, the teeth, you'd have, for every one of those, you've got 3 support personnel who are making sure that those guys are getting the beans, bullets, and fuel that they need to continue the fight. So with 4,000 Marines, you're not going to take over Venezuela. It's too large of a country. And one of the unintended consequences of this buildup is that it had provided Nicolas Maduro with a stage upon which to enact this incredible political theater, which is the Yankees are about to attack us and take over our country, and they're going to turn us all into Americans. And we don't want to do that. We want to be Venezuelans. So it's actually given him a boost in popularity. Now, the U.S. military has continued to strike boats in the region. And so now they're up to about 10 strikes, about 40 people killed. The Pentagon says that all of those strikes took place in international waters. Here's the problem with that: international waters extend 200 miles offshore, but most of those boats are crossing from Venezuela to Trinidad. And there is no place in this region where they're crossing where they could actually make it into true international waters, because this is all part of the territorial waters of Venezuela with some overlapping territorial waters of Trinidad. So I'm a little skeptical that we're actually striking these people in international waters, because again, none of those boats that you see getting struck are going from Caracas and crossing the Caribbean Sea and going all the way up to the United States. That's really far, right? That's really far. They're not doing that. Those boats don't have enough fuel. It would be impossible for them to do that. And so those boats are crossing likely to Trinidad. Now, maybe they could make it across to the southern coast of Haiti. I know for a fact, because I've been there and seen it with my own eyes, that a lot of drugs come into this southern coast near Jacmel, and then they cross over the mountains, which is this road that goes this way up here. And I actually rode this on a motorcycle once, all up through the mountains in Haiti. And I ran into some convoys of side by sides that were carrying cocaine. So I know for a fact that is a route. And so it might be possible that some of these are going across to Haiti, although that is still a long way to go for one of those small boats. And so if they are doing that, then yes, they would get into international waters and we'd be able to strike them there without causing a international incident. What does all this mean? Here's what we might see. I think it's probably a 90% chance that we're going to see airstrikes inside Venezuela. Why? Because President Trump keeps saying he's going to do it, and he wants to make a point that we have the ability to do it. He doesn't want to say he's going to do it and then look weak and not do it. So I think it's very likely that we see that happen. Without a doubt, the U.S. has the ability to identify and target actual known drug sites, so places where drugs are made or stored, as most cocaine that comes out of Venezuela is not grown in Venezuela. The coca is grown in Colombia. It is then shipped to Venezuela either in raw form or in processed form as cocaine, and then shipped out of Venezuela. But there's a lot more drugs that go via the land route than go via the sea, just by virtue of the fact that it's much easier to move stuff on the land. If we really wanted to strike blow at the drugs that are flowing into the United States, we need to be striking in Mexico. And that might happen too. But I think that it's much easier for us to strike at Venezuela because there's nothing they can do to retaliate. Now, one concerning note is that the Russian government has been sending cargo planes to Venezuela over the last couple of days. Military cargo planes from Russia have been landing in Caracas. We don't know exactly what they're bringing down, but if you could guess, it's probably SA 300s or SA 400s, which are surface to air missiles, they're air defense systems. Those things really are not going to be much use against an F 35. And if we're going to do strikes inside Venezuela, it's going to be either from an F 35 or more likely it's just going to be a Tomahawk land attack missile. And those SA 400s might be able to shoot it down, but they fly very low level and they have maneuvering capabilities to make it that much harder to hit them. We might be about to see a standoff battle between the United States and Russia in Venezuela with this Russian equipment. And Russia likely is sending that equipment to Venezuela specifically because of the threat that Trump might send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine because Russia wants to gather as much information about how its equipment stacks up against American Tomahawk missiles in somewhere else and use Venezuela as a laboratory for their data so that hopefully they can protect themselves against any potential strikes from Tomahawk missiles in Russia. Personally think that those missiles are not going to be any match for our modern Tomahawk missiles. But I guess we'll find out because that is the most likely thing that will happen. And I would gauge right now that's about a 90% chance. Now, as for ground troops going into Venezuela, that's probably a 10% chance or less. It's just not likely to happen.